People do tend to link what's happening in the brain too deeply to behavior. And so if I were a scientist working in a lab studying certain behaviors of individual and how they got there, I think this would be a much more nuanced conversation. What is happening in my company where people don't want to remain? Because I need and want this diversity here. We need and want this diversity here. Why is this happening?
Today's episode of the HR L&D Podcast is sponsored by Deal. Now, take a moment, if you would, to consider the following pre-show scenario. Imagine you had to visit 16 houses just to cook your dinner. One place has the pots, another has the pans, another has the stove, and another has the food. You get the idea. Sounds ridiculous, right? Well, the reality is most global businesses operate exactly the same way, using 16 different tools and platforms to hire, manage, and pay their workforce. But now there's one platform that does it all, and that's today's sponsor. That's Deal. That's DEEL. And Deal is the all-in-one platform built for global work. So whether you're an enterprise business, a small company, or something in between, from automated onboarding to performance assessments and beyond, you can manage the entire worker lifecycle all under one roof. Hire and onboard talent in over 150 countries, or run payroll in over 100 countries. Even offer competitive benefits, equity, and equipment. With Deal's industry-leading suite of HR tools, payroll solutions, and compliance services, you can scale globally with unmatched speed and expertise. So are you ready to transform your global HR system? If you are, click in the link in the show notes to book a demo with Deal today. That's DEEL. Welcome to the HR L&D Podcast, where we explore cutting-edge HR trends and best practices with top leaders who are shaping the future of work. Hello and welcome back to the HR L&D Podcast. My name is Nick Day. I'm CEO of JGA Recruitment Group, and we are specialist HR recruiters. Of course, if you do enjoy this show, please do take a second to share it with all of your HR colleagues and friends. Together, we can really help raise the profile of HR and people management for everyone globally. And if you do get a spare moment as well, please do leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Right, well, let's talk about today, because we are going to be fully immersed in the world of DEI on today's episode, as I'm joined by Sophia Kristjansson, a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert who is also very skilled in the world of change management, people strategies, and executive coaching, something I'm particularly passionate about myself. So it should be a really good conversation. She's someone who applies these concepts of behavioural neuroscience and organisational psychology to help leaders and their organisations to achieve their business outcomes. She also helps professionals transform their leadership cultures to generate significant, sustainable behavioral change that supports organizational cultures of both inclusion and in relation to belonging. She's a published author with a master's in neuroscience and leadership from Middlesex University. And she also contributed to a DEI chapter in the book, The Secret Sauce for Leading Transformational Change, a link for which will be in the show notes if you want to grab yourselves a copy. She is also a PhD candidate in Organisational Psychology at Canterbury Christ Church University and a faculty member at the University of Denver's College, where she teaches DEI structures, organisational leadership, human resources, and business strategy courses. We are in very, very good, capable hands when it comes to HR strategy and DEI, because she's also the founder of Lexicon Lens, a consultancy firm to help individuals and organisations benefit from initiatives that foster organisational innovation, help with DEI, helps with leadership, and more. And in fact, her clients are Fortune 500 executives and leadership teams from all sectors, from aerospace, manufacturing, and pharmaceuticals to retail, sports, technology, and more. I should add that she's joining me today from Boulder, Colorado, where she lives with her family. She loves riding horses, learning about natural horsemanship and hiking. So a bit like me, loves the outdoors by the sounds of things. Can't wait to jump into this conversation. Sophia, welcome to the HR L&D Podcast. How are you feeling today?
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Super happy to have you, particularly with all the things that you've studied and all the things you've been researching. I can't wait to dive into the detail. But before we do, let me ask you my first question. Something I asked all of my guests, which is this: what do the words human resources mean to you?
And that is not a small question. Let's see. Human resources to me, I actually feel like human resources needs to be renamed people strategy resources, or something that's more human in its name. But I will say that the breadth of HR really has to do with the technology and kind of the capacity that that people are going to have, employees are going to have across an organization. It also means the strategy, which is where I live, and how people experience an organization from the moment that they interview for a position to getting the role, onboarding, being developed, and maybe leaving. We have lots of leaving organizations this time.
Sure.
But, knowing what that journey is going to be like across the organization and connecting the people strategy that leadership into the business goals of the organization.
Nice.
So we can't that we're there to achieve a goal.
I think that's a great place to start, because you talked about strategy, and I've used the question, what does human resources mean to you? Because I've run this show now since 2018. The reality is the profession's evolved since then into people management and CPOs now rather than CHROs. So the great thing is we're seeing that evolution. But what I'm really interested in today is you're coming from very much an academic background, as well as someone who obviously operates in this field. And I know from my own experience and those that have studied around me that when you do a master's or a PhD, there's an awful lot of research that goes into that. So you must have read and researched so much information around HR strategy, people strategy, DEI, and so on. What is it that's been fueling that journey for you? Where does that passion come from? I'd love to learn about any of the particular insights perhaps you've discovered during that research journey that really led you to want to learn more.
So one of the core pieces of my philosophy is around learning. I love to learn. And, we learn things that are focused in on goals that we have, and we learn organically. And so all of the things that I have learned have led me to this point of consulting with organizations to build innovative cultures. But let's see, I think that in my work with neuroscience and understanding the connection between, or the would-be connection between how we think and how we behave is very not only interesting but helpful. And I have maybe an example to share with you of that.
Please.
Early on, when I was coaching and guiding leaders through change, and this was during maybe the early 2000s when coaching was in its infancy as a profession, executive leaders were having challenge navigating that change. I noticed they get very nervous, and usually, coaching in organizations is linked to some kind of goal, some kind of real behavioral change that the organization wants to see. And with one particular client, I used the neuroscience of change. I used the idea of neuroplasticity, and that we all learn and grow, and that we are capable of doing so in many different ways, both active and passive, and help that individual understand the process that he was going to go through as he made this change. As I based the work that we were doing together, this talking, around something that was real in science, I noticed the individual relax. And he was able to focus in on what I was saying and the goals that he was trying to achieve, rather than the nervousness of getting there. And, at first when we go through change, it's hard to dial into what that change needs to be, right? and how we're going to do it. It feels like a lot of effort, and it is. And that is because we have to build new highways, if you will, between neurons. And so I describe it as if you've done something many times over many years, that highway, that neuron highway is a well-wrote road, if you can think of it that way.
I follow.
Versus when you do something new, you might be going through a path in the woods that will eventually become a more well-trodden path, and then road, and then highway. So it takes time to make new actions more automated. And I know that sounds more like a computer, but that is sort of what happens in the brain, that we are not having to actively think about what it is that we're trying to do. It just happens automatically. Sure. So that I based my coaching work on that. And I also went into consulting gigs with the same idea in mind. So that has been an eye-opener for me. This is a caveat, though. People do tend to maybe link what's happening in the brain too deeply to behavior. And so, if I were a scientist working in a lab studying certain behaviors of individuals and how they got there, I think this would be a much more nuanced conversation.
Okay, interesting. So for those listening to this who perhaps there's a coaching sense as, well, got you here won't get you there, right? So maybe we need some new neural pathways to be created, some new roadways or highways to be created in order to achieve the outcomes that we are striving to achieve. And we know that within the world of HR, something that many HR directors and leaders have at the top of their strategy list of priorities is to improve the organizational sense of belonging within a business, which of course ties in a lot of all of the DEI principles, really, not just inclusion, but feeling like you belong within that business once you're part of that culture. So what are some of the best practices an HR leader can follow to help them establish a culture, from your research and from the experience you've gained working with Fortune 500 companies, where they can establish a culture where everyone really does start to feel valued? Yeah,
that's a great question. So I like to talk about inclusion and belonging in terms of an equation. And so if you understand that one needs to balance a sense of uniqueness, personal uniqueness, with a sense of belonging, that will equal inclusion. So it's uniqueness plus belonging equals inclusion. What I teach organizations, so not only through coaching, but also learning and development with teams and divisions, is that, first of all, you can't think about all of your development opportunities as being totally scalable. There has to be some kind of touch point deep into what's going on the team, because different teams behave in different ways. They are microcultures of a larger organizational culture. Now, leaders or people managers play a critical role in developing that sense of inclusion across an organization. And one of the things they can do, first of all, is have a baseline belief in diversity and the power of diversity across an organization, and be open, show openness to people who are different than they are. And that in and of itself takes a lot of work, because we are now delving into what unconscious bias, the effect that unconscious bias can have on relationships without us even knowing. But this openness, this sense of openness is extremely important. The second thing is building a learning culture, a culture in which, and I talked about curiosity that I have and the passion for learning. People in organizations need to have some kind of curiosity for learning and growing. And that understanding of learning opens people up to differences, opens people up to asking questions. And that is very important. Not having all of the answers all the time, which is something that we are trained to do, right? I remember working with a team of leaders, and they did very well, but when I watched them interact with one another, they never asked any questions of each other. And they just kind of told one another what they were doing, how to interact with each other. It was an interesting dynamic. And I said, before you tell anybody anything, ask them 3 questions. That's your job. And what that forces leaders to do is to really listen to what's being said. We get to know people better. We get to know their perspectives better. We get to see kind of their uniqueness in action, right? And we can blend that again with the sense of belonging that we're creating. So we all belong to a whole. We all feel like we have a place on a team, and we come into that team feeling like our unique experiences and perspectives and talents will be valued. And so when we can blend those 2 things together, when a leader learns how to do that, then the outcome is the feeling of inclusion.
Sure.
So that is not something that is generally operationalized. That is something that has to be addressed on a team level in order to help leaders understand that there is an aspect or a type of leadership that is inclusive, right? So they have to practice these skills of listening and understanding and having curiosity, bringing people into the decision-making process, drawing boundaries around how decisions are made. Leaders always have to go into a room and make a decision that might not include their team, right? Thank you for all of your ideas, but this is the way we're going to go. They're responsible for helping their people understand when there's that collaboration going on and when they need to pull the trigger and make a decision that might not be in complete alignment with the process that maybe they've set in place.
Something that I'm hearing here, and correct me if I'm wrong. And I know obviously you work as an executive coach, and I've been through those qualifications as well, and also operate as an executive coach with clients. But something that came through is that some of the things you mentioned there, the tenets of a coaching culture, which is speak less, listen more, be more curious, ask more questions. And we are seeing in the world of work a big shift towards businesses that want to create more of a coaching culture within their businesses anyway, and certainly within modern leadership principles. So in order for a business to really improve their sense of belonging, do you think that naturally goes hand in hand with a coaching culture, or can it still be obtained in a culture that hasn't yet made that shift?
Well, that's an interesting question. Yes, I think that there's a shift that definitely can be made. The truth of the matter is that teaching people how to be organizational coaches within a company, right? That's going to take time, and not everybody is going to thrive in that kind of atmosphere, right? That kind of environment. Not everybody is really terrific at sitting back and asking questions and listening at a very deep level to understand where that person might need to go next. There's so many different pressures on leaders to perform and to deliver results. I like to say that, in order for a culture to be innovative and welcoming to all different kinds of people, leaders at least need to have the understanding and be able to practice question asking at some level, right? It's a spectrum, right? So sure, developing a coaching culture is terrific. That's great. But knowing that not everybody is going to thrive within that world, it's going to make some people nervous. And they're not going to necessarily understand how to practice this coaching model that the organization has put in place with the decision-making demands, right? And the way that a leader needs to behave to become a decision-making person.
Yeah.
Those could be in conflict with one another. And that if there's not enough training, then that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that links back to your learning point early on. You need to be passionate about learning. And some of that responsibility, as we know, falls on employees and leaders to want to invest in learning and developing their curiosity and their skills. I guess a question I'd like to ask them, because you mentioned it doesn't happen overnight. Coaching culture doesn't happen overnight. Creating a culture where there is a true sense of belonging doesn't happen overnight. And you could argue there's always a level of subjectivity on whether it's ever been truly achieved, because we're going to measure this through surveys. And there's probably, there may be a majority that say they have a culture. There will always be some that probably don't feel the same way. So I guess that leads me to ask the question of where does the true accountability fall for improving DEI and belonging? Because there's a natural tendency, certainly for the people that listen to this show, to feel like the responsibility falls on their shoulders as HR professionals or learning and development professionals. And actually, should it sit with them or should it sit with the C-suite or from your experience, who should take the accountability?
I believe the accountability lies with the leaders. If you're a people leader in an organization, no matter what level that is, that needs to be an expectation of something that you learn and take you into that role. Yes, this is often an initiative that comes from HR. But as we all know, as HR professionals, when we push something into the organization, all of a sudden, we're perceived as the ones who are responsible for it. And the leaders who are coming to the table are trying to understand, but don't necessarily get that they need to own it. And so I think it's really important to test and retest initiatives in organizations, do pilots, see how people are receiving it. Look at and listen for, it's kind of like a focus group pilot. Listen for how people take responsibility for something and delve into that, because that's kind of the unspoken way in which people work. We have the written way or what we expect and how work is going to get done. And then there's kind of the unspoken rules about how we get stuff done. And this kind of falls in there, right? So understanding how leaders are thinking about things, how they interact with one another, and how to artfully assign them the responsibility, I think is important. Accountability to something. So, at least in the United States, this is becoming a challenging issue. Using metrics to evaluate diversity, and I'm talking about process metrics, not filling in numbers, but a process metric, a scenario in which the leader can look at how his or her division is performing and identify hotspots that need to be addressed, and doing that in a very laser-like fashion is a good way of doing it. I'd also say that leadership plays a very important role, coupled with kind of like this organic kind of process as well. So you have leadership saying the right things and hopefully showing the right behaviors. At the same time that you have employee resource groups, which are more organic, right? Aligning employees behind what for many are development opportunities to get involved at a grassroots level to learn and grow and connect with people that are both the same as they are, but different as well. We can all be allies. So there's kind of this way that everything kind of comes together. But it is true that if the CEO says something and believes something is important, it will happen.
Sure.
I want to say one more thing.
Go for it.
It's really important to remember that in organizations, I believe, one of the most important things that leaders want to avoid is making expensive product development mistakes. And that has nothing to do with building culture on the outside, right? But it does. And so teaching leadership that their business decisions and the way that they achieve their goals is directly related to the culture that they're living in is one way of helping them understand the connection between just good business. DEI is just good business and, kind of a closed, siloed approach.
Hello, HR and people leaders. Are you exhausted of the war for talent cliche? The problem is when we hear a cliche, it usually exists for a reason. However, we think it's time for a fresh approach to the talent crisis. That's because at JGA Recruitment, we understand the real challenges you face in sourcing phenomenal HR and people candidates. And guess what? We think we have the solution. Our team is on a mission to revolutionize your hiring process. That's because we're not just recruiters. We're strategic partners dedicated to finding HR and people professionals who align perfectly with your company's vision and goals. So let's break the cycle of frustration together. Partner your talent acquisition strategies with JGA Recruitment and experience the difference in service, excellence, and results. No longer do you need to suffer the costs associated with a poor hire, because with over 100 five-star Google reviews and already trusted by many of the world's leading brands, why don't you take action today? Contact us at jgarecruitment.com to discover how we can help transform your HR and people teams. And here's a bonus. When you visit us, you can sign up for our weekly HR newsletter that's packed with invaluable industry insights and more. Let's revolutionize your HR talent acquisition strategies together and make the war for talent a cry from the past. Visit jjrecruitment.com to find out more.
Sure, that makes total sense. I like your reference to employee resource groups. Something, I don't know who said it, it's not mine. I'll make that very clear. But someone once said to me, or I read or I listened to someone say, insight is sight from the inside, right? And the idea then for employee resource groups providing the insights, because they are included in an opportunity really to talk about where a business could improve or where things are working, where they're not working in a way where there's no risk of retribution if for speaking up. I think it's really important. But we also know that inclusion builds empowerment, and with empowerment builds happiness and productivity and all the wonderful things that improve business success. I think that's really interesting. But it's something that I've seen, and from my recruitment lens, I'm very interested in looking at stats and looking at workforce movements and things like that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but certainly some of the research that I've seen suggests that many women and people of color are actually leaving the workforce. Right? They're not feeling included enough. They're feeling like they need to vote with their feet and leave an organization in order to find their sense of belonging often. And that's hitting many, the performance metrics of any business. The ability to attract and retain its top staff will often be linked to top performance. So with that in mind, what can HR leaders do to, I guess, improve the attraction and retention strategies they're looking to deploy that can also improve the culture and belonging of their business? And is it something that you're seeing as well in terms of people leaving the workforce?
Yes. So what I find is that, I think in the past 12 months, I've had many conversations on this topic where leaders say, I spend a lot of money on supporting women and non-white employees in my organization. I don't understand why they keep on leaving. What is it? I know some of them are picked off by other organizations, so we're doing all of the work to develop them. But what is happening in my company where people don't want to remain? Because I need and want this diversity here. We need and want this diversity here. Why is this happening? And, I don't have a magic, solution. I don't see all of the trends and the reasons why, but I do think that two things are going. One, I think that when push comes to shove, women and non-white employees don't necessarily feel deeply comfortable in the cultures they're working. And this is something that's so incredibly personal, and you hear about it in hindsight, right? Well, it was just too much. I have responsibilities at home with a family, and I couldn't build in the flexibility that I in order to achieve the goals, or I was overlooked for promotion. And I really don't understand why. Now that's a question, right? That could go in many different. But I think the way that people behave, the way that they communicate on teams is impacting the experience that women and non-white employees have in organizations. And this is why I believe that, all of the wonderful things that learning and development does to build, develop, and grow and help employees thrive in an organization is very important. And we do want to treat everyone the same way. But the truth of the matter is we're not all coming to the table with the same understanding of that, right? We can all have the same value, right? We can all believe that diversity is important. And when push comes to shove, we can communicate that in a very different way that then could offend somebody, right? Or build on top of years of difficulty that an individual has experienced, which then it's too much. I'm gonna, I'm throwing my hand up and I'm gonna go. So that's one area where I think culture, plays a role in an organization. The other way that I think it's affecting people is that, I talked a little bit about innovation, the importance of innovation, how I really see my role and my passion is around creating innovative cultures, organizations. I think that there is a lack of time for people to actually innovate. There is such a fast pace and a huge workload that employees experience on a daily basis that there's no time for them to really hit the pause button and think about, right? And some organizations do have time that they set aside for their employees to innovate on their own, right? But you still have to get all your work done.
Yeah.
So let's say in said a company that you get 20% of your time that you're going to get involved with some kind of innovative endeavor. You choose what it is. You still have that 5 to 6 day workload, right? Then squished into 4 days or 5 days. You have to take your weekend and work on it. I think that there's a misunderstanding between how the load and the expectation of getting work done versus this need we all have to innovate. And I find a lot of people who leave organizations starting businesses of their own or becoming consultants, something that they're doing on their own, and they are able to innovate. And I think that there's some kind of foundational need we all have as human beings to be able to do that. So
we're often very head down with not enough time to lift our heads up, right? I mean, you work in executive coaching as I do. Every leader I speak to will say one of their biggest constraints is time. They haven't got time to do X, Y, or Z, right? And whether that's working at home or spending time with their family, time is the one thing that people don't seem to have enough of. And yet when we create time, which you obviously can't do as a construct, but if we find more time available to it's amazing. That's when the innovation happens. That's when the wonderful things can happen. Yeah. But it's finding those moments in the day or booking it in. I thought it was really interesting when you're talking about it's not that there's not a willingness to create belonging within an employee culture that creates a challenge. It's often, you create an image for me that I haven't thought about before. It just popped into my head when you were talking with your first response. The idea, I'm a big football fan. And I was thinking, you know what? Everyone in a particular team, so I'm a Spurs fan in the UK, a Tottenham Hotspur fan. Everyone who plays for that club wants to win the next game, presumably, right? But if they all come with their own way of making that happen, they're not going to win football matches because there's no cohesion in the process, in the methodology, in the tactics, the strategies. They may all want the same outcome, but ultimately it's going to be fragmented unless they all come together. And that's, of course, what a manager is for, and that's arguably what a leader is for within a business. So I think it was a really interesting point that you raised to say it's not that there isn't a willingness to do this. You have a lot of leaders coming to you saying, look, I'm losing great talent. I want a diverse culture. What can I do to stop it? And actually, that's a great thing to hear, that where leaders do want to create diverse and inclusive cultures, because you could argue that potentially, certainly going back a few years, was the problem. There weren't enough leaders that wanted to even create that in the first place. So that's a great step change if we're now seeing leaders that do want to create that. The next step change sounds to me like we now need leaders to come together to create a cohesive strategy with whatever that might be within an organization. So there's one voice, one method. I thought that was a really interesting response that you gave, and it created that footballing image for me that made it all make sense. I thought that was quite interesting.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up football, because I just watched the Netflix special on David Beckham.
I did too. Brilliant, by the way. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, it was well done. But you could see the difference between his team experience at Arsenal, where the manager was very clear about, we are all one, we're all the same. We're going to bring all of our talents together as one to achieve our goal, versus Real Madrid, where you had stars of many flavors who were coming, and, Beckham had to figure out how to kind of fit into that mold, right? So yeah, there's something to be said about losing that ego, placing that ego over to the side and focusing on the goal that you have in front of you, no pun intended, to achieve business outcomes that are sought. I think that, the sports analogy might end there, because in organizations, of course, we don't have leaders, or probably we shouldn't have leaders who are so directive.
Sure.
Right. And want everybody to be so much the same. In terms of their focus and their concentration. That goes back to my comment on uniqueness. We all bring this uniqueness. So some kind of appreciation for the individual and the talents of that person, also an understanding of their own challenge.
Yeah.
Coupled with the belonging, sense of belonging, will be better.
I'll also leave the football analogies after this one, but again, something that comes to mind if we're thinking about diversity, and you mentioned David Beckham. As talented as he was, 11 David Beckhams don't win you a football match. It takes a diversity of skills and people and personalities that create a winning team. As good as he was, you need all the different skills and things, and the same in any workforce, right? It's that diversity of talent that really brings true performance. Now, we've seen the workplace evolve significantly, particularly since the pandemic, that word, which I dare use, but it's still having an impact. And we've got technological transformation and rapid change happening. With that in mind, new ways of working with global boundaries almost disappearing now, with the way that we can operate and the way that we can recruit and the way that we can communicate. I'm speaking to you now over in Colorado, and it's as if, where you could easily be in the UK, no one would know the difference. How can HR leaders successfully operationalize inclusive behaviors in any environment? So be that office, be that remote, be that across global boundaries. Are there things they need to consider in order to really optimize their inclusive behaviors?
Great question. And leaders do get stuck on this, but I think that if you start with the belief that you're building a culture of learning, no matter where you sit around the globe, if you are understanding that this sense of curiosity is what you need to tap into. And one of the core behaviors of your organization is we're a learning culture, and here's what that looks like, right? And work in maybe even through the back door, because some cultures are very different. We have unique considerations in the United States that other countries don't have. So we have to know how to think globally and act locally. But as far as a global culture, understanding that learning is one of the core foundational beliefs we need to have, I think is important.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yes.
I like that as well, because it takes us full circle. We started with the importance of learning. We're almost finishing there as well, which is great. Before we open the vault, Sophia, one thing I want to ask, because it's an opportunity for hopefully to share some of the wonderful work you do with Lexicon Lens. I wonder if you could share with the listeners a little bit more about your consulting firm, the kind of work that you're involved in case someone's listening and wants to find out more. But also, I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about the chapter that you wrote in the book, The Secret Sauce for Leading Transformational Change. So for those that are interested in that book, there will be a link in the show notes as well. And just wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about your business and of course your writing.
Thank you. So the book, I wrote a chapter in the book, The Secret Sauce for Transformational Change, and it was about inclusion on teams and how to operationalize that inclusion with many people in mind. I took a case study of work that I did in an organization to discuss really the qualities of that leader to build a learning culture and the outcomes. So that's kind of a summary of what that article is about. And it was that was an engagement that was a lot of fun and does continue in some way.
Super.
Lexicon Lens, I founded in 2013. And this is an organization that focuses on building innovative cultures. And we work through a multitude of different types of solutions, whether it be through leadership modules or consulting to build culture of inclusion and belonging, or building out a metrics model for DEI in an organization, or executive coaching, team coaching, that kind of thing. So it's really a company that is based on building learning cultures and tapping into that innovation that, of course, is focused on business results and helps people understand, well, what's in it for me, right? And this is my passion. This is really what I love to do. Currently, I'm engaged with a pharmaceutical organization to help them build their DEI structures across the company. We're focused right now on the United States, but this is a global firm. And so we're building into that global firm. One of the most exciting things that I have witnessed is their adoption of a core value and behavior to be inclusive and embrace diversity. So they are describing what good looks like for all levels of the organization from a global perspective around respecting different cultures and asking questions and with culture in mind, which I think is a very interesting way of approaching it. And then we are piloting behavioral change in the organization, which is going to be, we're in the process of doing it now. There's some really great feedback that's coming in to describe what is working and what isn't working for these leaders. And I'm really excited to see how we're going to take it to the next level and go across the organization to make
it sounds absolutely fascinating. I love that you're used to the word prescribing as well. I don't know if that was choice when you work with a pharmaceutical company, but I've quite enjoyed that. But of course, if anyone listening to this that wants to find out more or is passionate about innovative strategies, shall we say, about improving your DEI strategies or improving your sense of belonging or your cultures, then please do reach out. You can find out more at lexiconlens.com, and there will be a link directly in the show notes. So please do take a look at that. And actually, it's a great website just to navigate through and have a look anyway. So do please check that out in the show notes. Right, we're going to open the HR L&D vault. These are 3 short, sharp questions for you, Sophia. Number 1 is, if you could give one piece of advice to the world, what would it be?
Finding your passion is really critical in order for you to live a fulfilling life. And hopefully the idea of learning something new is incorporated into that, helping you find it.
Fantastic. I can't argue with passion. I think it's the center point for anything that you want to do. If you want to do it well, then you need to be passionate about it for sure. If you had the opportunity, what advice would you give to a younger you just starting out in this new world of work?
Relax. It's all going to be okay. You don't have to do everything perfectly.
Yeah, love that. Especially, it's so relevant right now as well with mental health and people just taking on too much. This too shall pass. I love that saying, this too shall pass. Or the snow globe metaphor, where sometimes we think about everything being shaken up. It'll settle eventually, and then the view will show itself. So relax. Love that. And last but not least, what is the guiding principle behavior you've seen in every great leader that you've worked with?
Oh gosh, it goes back to that passion that it really does go back to a sense of learning and curiosity, a willingness to grow in however that individual defines it, right?
Sure.
But a willingness to grow, and I would add to that caring about people and an ability to communicate how that integrates with business goals.
Fantastic. What a lovely way to finish the show. And also, I think your passion comes through when we get to talk about passion itself, just as a term. It's great seeing you come alive talking about learning, curiosity, inclusion, belonging, leadership, all those things. So it's been an absolute pleasure, Sophia, having you on the L&D podcast with me today, talking about all these things. I hope it's been really useful to the HR leaders that listen to this show, because I know it's top of their agendas. It's something that everyone wants to get right, and it's necessary that we do get it right. And we know it's not a simple fix. It takes time, but I think some of the things you shared with us today have been really, really helpful. For those who want to find out more, I will include an email, Sophia's email direct in the show notes, along with her LinkedIn profile and, of course, a link to her website, lexiconlens.com. There will also be a link to the DEI chapter in the book, The Secret Sauce for Leading Transformational Change. So if you're interested in reading more about that, please do check it out in the show notes. You can check it out right here, right now. Remember to review the show if you get a moment. And, of course, if you are an HR and L&D professional listening to this show and you need support with an HR-related vacancy, here at JJ Recruitment, we do support clients both in the UK and the US. So whatever your requirement might be, please do reach out to us, and one of my wonderful team will be very happy to take your call and support you with whatever your talent requirements may be. We know that attracting top talent and retaining it is particularly challenging in this current world of work. So my team are here to help you. So please do reach out. You can get us at jgarecruitment.com, and my contact details will also be in the show notes. Just leaves me to say one huge final thank you to Sophia Kristjansson for joining me today on the HR L&D podcast. Sophia, thank you ever so much.
Thank you very much. It's been terrific.
Today's episode of the HR L&D podcast is sponsored by Deal, the all-in-one global people platform that simplifies how you manage the entire global team lifecycle. From contractors, direct employees, EOR, and more, you can manage them all in one place with Deal. Hire and onboard talent in over 150 countries in minutes, or run payroll in over 100 countries with just one click. Offer competitive benefits, equipment, and equity from a single dashboard. Even customized career roadmaps, performance assessments, and more for your team through Deal's suite of AI-powered learning and development tools. So no matter your global business goals, Deal's team of over 200 legal experts keeps you compliant with local laws every step of the way. So whether you're an enterprise business, a small company, or something in between, Deal is built to meet your unique global HR needs. Ready to transform your global HR? Click the link in the show notes to book a demo with Deal today. That's DEEL.